All right, we have just looked at combining like terms, but that's not going to be enough for simplifying the different types of algebraic expressions we're going to work with. Let's consider x plus 3 times x minus 4. If we wanted to try and simplify this, we might think about order of operations. And order of operations tells us we need to deal what's inside the parentheses first. However, we can't combine those because they're not like terms. So we're a little bit stuck here, but there is something that we can do, and this involves the distributive property, which I'm going to write out over here. The distributive property. Okay. The distributive property says if we have something, we'll represent that with A, being multiplied by a sum, B plus C, we know that order of operations tells us that we do the addition first because it's inside the parentheses, and then we multiply the result by A. But the distributive property says we get the same answer if we take A times B, the first term inside, and A times C, the second term inside, and add them together. So it's called the distributive property because this A is getting distributed to both the B and C. A gets multiplied by B, and it also gets multiplied by C. This lets us sidestep order of operations. So instead of doing the addition first, because it's inside the parentheses, we're allowed to do the multiplication first, so long as we multiply the thing on the outside by both of the terms on the inside, and then add. So if we take this back to the problem that we were looking at, we can take this 3 that's on the outside of the parentheses, and we can distribute it to the x and to the negative 4. It's okay that this is a subtraction instead of an addition. We just have to keep the subtraction inside. So we leave the x out front, and then when we do the distributing, 3 times x gives us 3x, and then we have minus, I'm going to bring down that subtraction, 3 times 4 gives us 12. So when we apply the distributive property here, that gives us 3x minus 12. What this has done for us is it's gotten rid of the parentheses, it's gotten rid of those grouping symbols, and now that we've rewritten it without them, we can combine these like terms, because the x and the 3x are like terms. X plus 3x is 4x, so this gives us 4x minus 12 as our simplified answer. Before, we had a whole lot going on with parentheses and multiplication and whatnot, and now we've rewritten this as a much simpler expression with just 2 terms. We will use the distributive property when we have a complicated algebraic expression with parentheses to get rid of those and allow us to combine like terms and simplify things. We're going to look at a few different examples now that involve negative signs and subtractions, so we can get used to those. And then if you want more help, you can watch the video examples linked below. But let's do 4 similar examples here. Let's take a look at 3 plus 2 times x minus 1. We're going to look at 3 minus 2 times x minus 1. Sorry, times x plus 1. We're going to look at 3 minus 2 times x minus 1. And we're going to look at 3 minus the quantity x minus 1. So 4 examples, each of which has at least a subtraction or a negative in it. And we want to be very careful so that we're dealing with all of the subtractions and negatives properly. Let's start with this first example, 3 plus 2 times x minus 1. Sometimes students have a compulsion to try and add the 3 plus 2 first. But we can't do that because that's the last thing that happens under order of operations. We know that the parentheses goes first and then this multiplication happens, so we cannot add these 3 plus 2. Instead, we're going to have to use the distributive property to get rid of those parentheses before we combine any like terms. So we're going to distribute that 2. We're going to leave the 3 alone out front. Now 2 times x is going to give us 2x. And then we bring down that subtraction. 2 times 1 is 1. So this is going to be 3 plus 2x minus 1. And now we can combine those constant terms. 3 minus 1 is 2. And we keep the 2x. So we've got 2 plus 2x as our simplified expression. Let's look at the next one. In the next one, we have to distribute the negative 2. Because this is a subtraction, this term right here, if we were ignoring all the parentheses, would be negative 2. And so that negative needs to get distributed along with the 2. So again, we're going to keep the 3 out front. Now negative 2 times x is going to be negative 2x. And then negative 2 times 1 is going to give us negative 2. So when we distribute, that gives us 3 minus 2x minus 2. Now again, we can combine the constant terms. This time we've got 3 minus 2, which gives us 1. We bring down the negative 2x, and we've got 1 minus 2x. Good. Let's look at the next example. Here again, we've got a negative that needs to be distributed, but we have a subtraction inside the parentheses. Let's see how this works. We need to take that negative 2 and multiply it by x and by the negative 1. We're going to keep that 3 out front. Now negative 2 times x is still going to be negative 2x. But when we distribute that negative 2 to the last term inside the negative 1, we know that a negative times a negative is going to give us a positive. So that negative 2 times negative 1 is going to give us a positive 2. This is how we have to be careful when we're dealing with negative signs. Always make sure that you're distributing things correctly. Now again, we're going to combine the constant terms, but this time we've got 3 plus 2, which is 5. And we bring down that negative 2x, and we end up with 5 minus 2x. All right. This last problem, we've got 3 minus the quantity x minus 1. Now there isn't a number in front, but there is one that we can put there without changing the value. It is that invisible 1. And once we put that in, we distribute the negative 1 to both of those terms. We keep the 3 out front. Negative 1 times x gives us negative 1x, or negative x. And then negative 1 times negative 1 gives us positive 1. So we've got 3 minus x plus 1. Combine the constant terms, 3 plus 1 is 4, and we've got 4 minus x. Really quick, there's another way to do that problem without writing in the invisible 1. This is kind of like the invisible 1 was training wheels, and now we're taking the training wheels off. We can just distribute the subtraction. So we can take that subtraction and distribute it. So we've got 3, and then when we subtract x, that's going to be minus x. But then when we subtract negative 1, we know that subtracting a negative is the same as adding, so that becomes plus 1. And when we combine those like terms, we get the same final answer, 4 minus x. You can use either method. I have a slight preference for the second one. Anytime we feel comfortable writing a little bit less and we're able to do that effectively, it's going to make things a little bit more streamlined in the long run. But if you want to put that imaginary 1 there, if you want the training wheels, you are good to go. You're still riding your bike, and that's how we do it. Again, there are more examples if you click on the link below of worked out problems so that you can go through them slowly. I would recommend trying each of those problems on your own first and then watching the videos to see if you've done it correctly. And if you've made a mistake, you can compare your work to the video and learn from the mistake.